Although most alternative playstyles tend to be a little different from their nowadays rather forced meta, none could be more contrasting than a utility tank support and a one-shot auto-attack assassin. And that's the case with everyone's favourite Thresher, Thresh. Damn, I could have never guessed how this guy would turn out in the book. Thresh, or Urlach Grail as he was known before becoming a funny skeleton hooker, was released near the start of Season 3 as a utility support champion, similar to Leona but especially like Blitzcrank. Thresh still had all the utility he has now, only better in many ways with far more stats before he had them ripped away from him over many years of nerfs. That said, I feel like League was still in an era where Riot didn't really like making champions for specific lanes or roles beyond a mere recommendation, and so wishing that Big Chain Man could stand a chance in a couple of fighter roles outside of support may have led to some ambitious stats. Over time, Thresh took stat hits to his armor and health to make him more vulnerable in early laning. And with some other changes, support Thresh would eventually be seen as kinda balanced. Him having fighter capabilities like damage and durability actually kinda makes sense when you notice that League itself still considers Thresh's secondary role as a fighter to this day. But with many nerfs to balance a support led to rather interesting declines on his abilities in other places, but not without some rather unexpected buffs in places along the way, both indirect and direct. For his stats, his base AD is pretty low for reasons we'll see later, and his armor looks better than it used to when you consider he used to have a base of 16 with no growth. With the recent durability patch, all ranged champions now have some magic resistance growth per level worth something, but both before and after the change that still has him amongst the lowest magic resistance champions in the game. When you're an up-close tank champion with magic resistance similar to Yuumi of all things, you might not be the best at that specific job. Finally, his range is at 450, which is even lower than the 475 it used to be long ago, because even that was considered too long for a decent damage utility support to have apparently. Moving on to his kit, Thresh's passive is Damnation. It causes all nearby enemy champions, large minions and monsters to drop a soul on death. Epic monsters drop 2, and smaller enemies have a 33% chance to drop 1. Thresh collects souls near him or his lantern. For each soul collected, Thresh gains the following: 1 ability power, 1 armor, and 1.5 on-hit magic damage. Technically, the on-hit damage is part of his E passive, but I thought it would make more sense to mention at least this part here. The ability went through numerous changes to its numbers, initially having diminishing returns on the soul bonuses, before being flattened to 0.75 AP and armor per soul, until we reach the stats they give now as attempts to lightly buff Thresh. The souls give something for Thresh to do other than sit in bushes and throw hooks when playing support, and reward him with infinite scaling. It does not take long for the soul armor bonuses to make up for his low base armor and lack of armor growth, but tough lane matchups or falling behind can have him struggling to even keep up. The ability power is fairly insignificant because his AP ratios are quite low until patch 13.4, likely because he has this stacking, and the on-hit bonus is undoubtedly the best part of his kit damage-wise. 100 souls dealing 150 magic damage on hit may sound insignificant unless Thresh builds around it with attack speed, magic penetration and durability, turning him into a surprisingly powerful tank DPS. Of course, no support budget can accommodate that when you realise how brutally brittle Thresh's defences are without any tank items. The Lantern Collection gives an additional decision for Thresh to sacrifice his most powerful support ability's cooldown just to nab a soul or 3 here and there, which support Thresh may almost never do, but playing funny top Thresh makes the decision a little simpler. Guaranteed souls on large minions and monsters means that you could try and turbo your soul gain, not you, by playing Thresh jungle in Season 13 as long as the enemy jungler politely forgets you exist. Go! Thresh's Q is Death Sentence. The Thresh hook you always hit when no one's looking, but the moment it actually matters, everyone's already missing pinging you. It deals a good chunk of magic damage with a 90% AP ratio, and stuns the first target struck for 1.5 seconds. Thresh pulls the target twice over the hook's duration, and during this you can recast the ability to dash towards them. You can do this before Thresh does the short pulls, in which case you cancel them. When you hook a champion, there's a slight delay before you can dash, but if you hook a non-champion you can dash straight away, making jungle monsters and minions great mobility tools for Thresh. This lack of delay also means that you can hook and dash to minions you last hit with the Q, if needed, but this requires very precise timing to execute and will need some practice. You can't just mash Q. It should also be noted that Thresh can't attack while the hook is in flight or stuck in someone, which is the same amount of time as someone is stunned. If you recast it quickly, you can attack before your opponent is out of the stun. And although you can't attack while flying, you're free to cast your W and E even while dashing so long as it isn't in the initial cast time. It's Thresh support's main ability, so the worth of a Thresh player is often determined by how many of these they hit. It has a good range like Blitzcrank's hook, but with a longer stationary cast time before you can throw it, giving much more time for opponents to react. Being his signature ability, Death Sentence can be maxed literally either first, second, or last depending on preference, as a higher level means more hook spam, but if you're good at landing them, you might never actually need more than one depending on what you plan to do with it. A long time ago, you could use Flash during the windup, allowing for some shocking and overpowered plays. At least it must have been, because Riot removed that functionality from Thresh. Makes sense. Flashing while charging a hook skill shot is too powerful even today. Wait, why is he allowed to? Thresh's W is Dark Passage, or more commonly referred to as the Lantern. Thresh throws his lantern to an area, lingering for 6 seconds, collecting souls and giving shields to one ally and Thresh himself if they touch the lantern. An ally can click the lantern while close enough to it to dash towards Thresh. Thresh's lantern is the get out of jail card everyone wants when they've made a mistake, and thus your teammates' mistakes are now often your mistakes from their perspective. That aside, coordinated party members can do a real leap of faith if they trust their Thresh and go for some truly crazy plays like tower dives, knowingly overextending because they know their escape will be there. In contrast, in games with randoms it really is just to save your AD carry who stupidly flashed in, or throwing it to save an ally who just chooses to flash instead. Outside of support, its primary use is for an actually pretty hefty shield for yourself that can actually make a difference in some 1v1s. It's a shame that it lost its AP ratio some time ago. You're getting 2 shield per soul now.
What did it cost? Everything.
On that note, it's pretty good to max second for fighter and tank build Thresh, and can be a good max second on support as well, particularly if your team tries to int that often. Thresh's E is Flay, with a passive and active component. The active sweeps your chain across an area, dealing magic damage scaling with 70% AP and slowing enemies after knocking them in the target direction. The knockback serves as near instant interruption, or actually instant interruption if you cast it towards yourself, placing the Flay start point directly on the enemy, and this is not to be underrated. With some timing, you can knock dashing enemies back to peel your carries or yourself with relative ease. It seems somehow even more of a 1-point wonder than Death Sentence at this point, as leveling Flay doesn't even lower the cooldown, but the active is definitely not why you would max this first. For the passive, your basic attacks are empowered to deal bonus magic damage from a minimum equal to your number of souls times 1.5, then charging over 10 seconds to a maximum equal to the soul damage, plus 80 to 200% total attack damage at max level. Even without a shred of AD and Thresh's poor base damage, this charged hit absolutely packs a punch and is the main reason Thresh's AD and attack range are so low. And forgetting the huge ratio, 1.5 magic damage per soul can easily stack up as we mentioned on the passive, and building around it can lead to extremely surprising DPS, comparing even to the likes of Kayle at fewer souls than you might think. It's pretty rare to have the full 10-second charge even in support as you farm with your Steel Shoulder Guards or Relic Shield, and even rarer in a lane where you have to last hit. But even at only 5-second charge, it slaps. This half of an ability alone sets the foundation of AD Thresh builds, and it speaks volumes when even a half viable build can come out of literally half an ability. AD Thresh builds always want to max this, but even support should consider maxing this first, as the extra ability damage and burst can help a lot with all-ins and poking through laning phase. Thresh's ultimate is the box. Contrary to the name, Thresh summons a pentagon of spectral walls that scale with 100% AP. I mean, one of them scales with 100% AP and slows by 99%. Enemies trigger the walls by walking into them, taking magic damage and the slow, but every wall broken after the first only has half the slow and none of the damage of the previous. It can seem a little underwhelming of an ultimate compared to some others, but 99% slow is still pretty huge, and even the additional wall breaks can severely disrupt a team if you can erect them in the midst of your enemies. The 99% slow against pursuing enemies also makes for a great peel or a literal wall to block choke points for a few seconds. Thresh was designed to be able to drag and flay an enemy towards his walls and even into multiple of them to get multiple hits, but these days all that would do is inefficiently stack slows with diminishing returns. On release, Thresh walls would also deal half damage on each wall after the first as well as slow, meaning you could absolutely tear someone down by kicking them into multiple walls. Although cultured individuals have already put together that 1 AP per soul plus 100% AP ratio equals big damage, the nerfing of his ultimate squandered the potential of AP Thresh as well as the removing of the ratio on his W. So though AP Thresh is still possible and can absolutely kill one enemy champion, it wasn't quite as entertaining as it could have been. Until patch 13.3 and then patch 13.4. These patches came out of absolutely nowhere. What this means for Thresh is that not only will he simply do more damage everywhere since he gets AP from souls no matter what he chooses to build, but actual AP Thresh can do such a colossal amount of damage on his combo, I can't call it bad anymore. Far from it. Rabadon's death cap is a bit expensive, but I personally wouldn't underestimate any Thresh crazy enough to buy it. Even if you can't drag someone into many walls, a hook and a flay can lead to a guaranteed hit from the box, which will lead to a lot of damage even without buying AP at all, and is a worthy combo to learn and practice. Thresh's kit lends itself mostly to support thanks to having a lot of value that doesn't scale with gold through having some kind of stun, slow, or both on all but one of his abilities. And even that ability has something somehow even greater. Unlike enchanters and mages, he can do just fine without stats and can focus on getting tanky and buying ability haste, even though he is arguably very squishy without them. This overwhelming crowd control and utility led to both Thresh's immense popularity and overpoweredness that we've come to associate with certain late champions. But several nerfs and retrains saw a diminish in Thresh's effectiveness, leading Riot to actually have to buff the Chain Warden. Many players would cry out that Thresh's visuals and lore don't actually fit the support role at all, especially at the time where the support role was basically just a sightstone with feelings, but thanks to the recent Ruination novel, Thresh's ability to support and pull some strings around from behind the scenes does actually kinda start to make sense. But don't let that stop you from playing a more lore-correct build. If a player decides to build AD or attack speed, Thresh can get marvellously high amounts of burst and DPS, but at a low range and still suffering from his weak base defenses, meaning Thresh top is likely on the brink of being viable, particularly with the more recent buffs to his souls and durability update. But just because Thresh top got better doesn't mean other champions didn't too. That said, it isn't impossible to play and is far from the least viable off-meta top laner, and with the right buff and meta, Thresh top could even become a truly meta option one day. Maybe not broken OP unless Riot really screw up, but he definitely has the potential, and so do Riot. Thresh is my most played champion since he released back in Season 3, and I've always liked how open his kit is to interpretation by the player. Lots of actually quite good AP ratios, but a large ult AP ratio with infinite scaling AP, only one AD ratio but it's a big ooga booga 200% total AD, on top of just fantastic utility make him easily one of the most versatile champions to at least choose a build for, even if only one of them has stood the test of time in terms of competitive viability. Personally, building different things leading to different playstyles in one champion makes them a lot of fun with lots of replayability, if you will, that I think a lot of other champions lack. Naturally, it's not something you'd expect from someone like Darius, who is what happens when a caveman designs a champion, but the vast number of shenanigans Thresh can pull over multiple games is likely what kept me playing him all this time and 100% what propelled me to make League YouTube content in the first place. This is different from even my more recent uploads, so I'd appreciate any gestures of support on this video so I can consider making more of these, as I actually have lots to say about a good number of champions. Thanks for watching. Shoutouts to the members Nashborn, Light, AJGBeats91, Warsquid, Genocide, Ultimate Ground, Kayle, Oblax, My Dad, N-Era, Cat with AK, Chloe M, and Imprilius. Thank you so much for your support.